As the world slowly quiets, imagine yourself being born into Japan at the end of the 16th century, a land unsettled, scarred by constant war, and shaped by the sword. This is not a gentle beginning. Your life does not open with safety or comfort. It opens with instability, uncertainty, and the sound of conflict that never truly fades into silence. This is your life as Miyamoto Musashi. You are born during the Sengoku period, a time when peace is rare and survival depends on strength, discipline, and awareness. Order exists only where force holds it together. Villages fear passing armies. Children grow up knowing that violence is not an exception, but a condition of life. From the beginning, the world teaches you that nothing is permanent, and no one is protected. Your childhood is not carefully recorded. Much about your early years remains uncertain, and that uncertainty itself is part of the story. You grow up without the clear structure of privilege. You are not raised in luxury. You are shaped instead by absence, roughness, and exposure to danger early in life. Stability is something other people may have. For you, movement and tension become normal. The sword enters your life early, not as a symbol but as necessity. In this world, a blade is not decoration. It is a tool for survival, reputation, and identity. Training is harsh. Mistakes are painful. Discipline is not gentle instruction, but repetition enforced by consequence. Your body learns before your mind fully understands. You grow up watching adults measure worth through skill and resolve. Honor is not spoken about softly. It is enforced through action. Weakness is not punished kindly. Fear is learned early, but it cannot be shown. You begin to understand that survival requires control over the self first, before control over anything else. As a young person, you are drawn toward conflict not because you enjoy chaos, but because conflict is where meaning is found in this society. Peace offers little opportunity. War creates paths. You learn that reputation spreads quickly, and that a single act can shape how you are seen for years. The pressure to prove yourself settles in quietly and does not leave. Your first duel comes early, far too early by modern standards. You are still a child, yet already stepping into a world where death is a possible outcome of reputation. The experience does not feel heroic. It feels heavy, serious, and final. Victory does not bring joy. It brings survival, and survival brings expectation. Once you step onto this path, turning back becomes impossible. As you grow older, the world around you continues to fracture. Clans rise and fall. Alliances shift. Battles reshape regions. You are surrounded by examples of warriors who gain power briefly, then vanish. Death is common. Glory is temporary. This reality sinks into you slowly, shaping your thinking in ways you may not fully recognize at the time. You begin to walk the path of a Ronin, a masterless warrior. This life is not romantic. It is uncertain, lonely, and dangerous. Without a lord, you have no guaranteed protection, no steady income, and no permanent home. You move from place to place, carrying your reputation with you like both a shield and a burden. Each encounter becomes a test. Each challenge is an opportunity to refine skill, but also a risk that could end everything. You learn to observe carefully, to measure distance, to read intent, to act only when necessary. Over time, fighting becomes less about aggression and more about control. You train constantly, not only in technique but in endurance. Hunger becomes familiar. Cold nights become routine. Comfort is rare, and when it appears, it feels temporary and unreliable. You learn not to depend on it. As your life continues, something subtle begins to change. The sword remains central, but your understanding of it deepens. You start to see combat not just as physical movement, but as timing, rhythm, and perception. Victory comes not from force alone, but from awareness. This realization separates you slowly from others walking the same path. Your name begins to spread, not loudly, not quickly, but steadily. With each duel, each survival, each moment where you walk away alive, your presence grows heavier in the minds of others. Some seek you out for glory. Others avoid you entirely. Both responses isolate you further. You live with constant alertness. Trust is limited. Every meeting carries uncertainty. Every challenge carries consequence. There is no retirement from this life, only continuation. As the night deepens and this first chapter of your life settles into quiet reflection, you stand not as legend yet, but as a man shaped by hardship, discipline, and relentless movement. The path ahead is long, demanding, and unforgiving, and it will slowly turn you into something the world remembers, but at great personal cost. This is where your journey begins. As your life continues forward, the world around you does not slow down, and neither do you. You move deeper into a landscape shaped by tension and quiet threat, where every road carries memory of violence, and every town has seen blood spill before. Travel itself is a test. You walk long distances on worn paths, carrying little more than your weapons, your awareness, and the reputation that now follows you like a shadow. Being a Ronin means living without anchors. There is no permanent shelter waiting for you, no voice calling you home. Nights are spent wherever safety can be found, sometimes in temples, sometimes under open sky, sometimes in places that feel only slightly safer than the road itself. Hunger comes and goes. Fatigue becomes familiar. You learn to ignore discomfort because attention must stay sharp. A tired warrior is a dead one. Duels become more frequent, but they are never casual. Each challenge carries weight. Sometimes they come from young men seeking recognition, sometimes from experienced fighters wanting to test themselves against a growing name. You learn quickly that hesitation invites death, but recklessness does the same. Control becomes your greatest weapon. Your fighting style begins to shift. You notice that strength alone is unreliable. Speed fades. Muscles fail. What remains constant is timing, distance, awareness. You begin to fight less like someone chasing victory and more like someone waiting for inevitability. You let opponents reveal themselves through movement and impatience. Many defeat themselves before you strike. The psychological weight of constant combat settles in quietly. Each duel ends a life, or nearly does. There is no celebration afterward, no applause, just silence, followed by the need to move on before consequences arrive. You carry these moments with you, even when you do not speak of them. The mind learns to hold memory without emotion, because emotion slows reaction. As your reputation grows, solitude deepens. People watch you more carefully. Conversations become cautious. Innkeepers hesitate. Locals whisper. Some treat you with respect, others with fear. Very few treat you as ordinary. This separation creates distance between you and the rest of society. You exist beside the world, not fully inside it. You continue to refine your technique, often alone. You practice with real weapons, not wooden ones. You test movements against fatigue, hunger, and uneven ground. You do not rely on ideal conditions. You train for reality as it exists, not as it is imagined. During this time, you begin to understand that survival is not just physical. The mind must remain steady. Fear must be acknowledged but not allowed to guide action. Anger must be restrained. Pride must be controlled. You see other warriors fall not because they lack skill, but because they lack balance. You begin to think differently about victory. Winning a duel no longer feels like success. Walking away without being drawn into unnecessary conflict feels more valuable. Yet conflict continues to find you. Your name invites it. As years pass, you are shaped by repetition. Walking, watching, waiting, fighting, leaving. There is no dramatic turning point yet, just accumulation. Experience layers itself slowly, changing how you stand, how you breathe, how you see. You start to sense that the sword is only part of the path. There is something deeper beneath technique, something connected to timing, awareness, and understanding the nature of confrontation itself. This idea does not arrive fully formed. It grows quietly, like a thought that returns again and again during long walks and silent nights. As this part of your life settles into the steady rhythm of movement and reflection, you remain a man defined by motion rather than place. You're becoming something rare, not because you seek it, but because the path you walk leaves little room for anything else. As your journey continues, the road itself becomes your teacher. Each step across Japan's uneven paths adds another quiet lesson, not spoken aloud, but learned through repetition and survival. You begin to notice how landscapes shape conflict. Narrow bridges force decisions. Open fields expose hesitation. Forests hide intention. Mountains slow arrogance. Nothing exists without consequence, and you learn to read the world the same way you read an opponent's stance. You fight less often now, not because challenges disappear, but because you choose carefully. You understand that every duel costs something, even when you win. Time, energy, attention. Life itself becomes narrower when it is constantly tested. You begin to avoid unnecessary encounters, yet your reputation continues to pull people toward you. The paradox deepens. The more you withdraw, the more others seek you. Your technique evolves quietly. You experiment with distance rather than speed, with position rather than strength. You begin to carry two swords not as tradition, but as practicality. This choice is not theatrical, it is functional. One blade controls space, the other ends movement. You do not announce this approach. You simply apply it when needed. Those who face you rarely understand what is happening until it is already over. Living as a Ronin continues to strip away attachment. You own very little. Possessions slow you down. Comfort distracts you. You eat when food is available. You rest when it is possible. You do not expect consistency. This way of living sharpens attention. Every moment matters because nothing is guaranteed. Isolation grows deeper. People recognize you now even if they have never seen you before. Your name travels faster than your body. This makes anonymity impossible. In some towns, doors close quietly when you arrive. In others, Challenges are prepared before you even settle. You learn to feel tension in the air, to sense when something is about to happen without being told. You spend long hours alone, walking, thinking, observing. These are not peaceful walks. They are alert movements through a world that remains dangerous. Yet within this constant awareness, something settles. You begin to understand that fear is information. It does not need to be eliminated, it needs to be read and used. During this period, you begin to reflect more deeply on what it means to face another human with intent to kill. You see patterns. Many opponents are driven by ego, desperation, or the desire to be seen. Few are calm. Fewer still are patient. You learn that patience breaks more opponents than force ever could. You also begin to notice your own changes. You speak less. You move differently. Your presence becomes quieter, heavier. You no longer rush toward recognition. Recognition finds you regardless. This distance from ambition allows clarity to grow. You are no longer proving yourself, you are refining yourself. The world around you continues to shift. Political power stabilizes in some regions while remaining fragile in others. Castles rise, battles end. Yet violence never disappears. It simply changes shape. You adapt without comment. Adaptation is survival. Training becomes internal as much as physical. You pay attention to breathing, posture, and balance even when not fighting. You observe your reactions to surprise, insult, and threat. You aim to remain unchanged by external pressure. This is not easy. It requires constant awareness. You begin to sense that the sword is only a mirror. It reflects the state of the person holding it. A restless mind creates reckless movement. A calm mind creates clarity. This understanding does not come from theory. It comes from living. As this chapter of your life settles, you are no longer simply a wandering fighter. You are becoming a student of conflict itself, not bound to any school, any lord, or any fixed doctrine. The path you walk is narrow, solitary, and demanding, but it continues forward without pause. The night deepens and the road stretches ahead, carrying you toward encounters that will shape not just your reputation, but your understanding of life, discipline, and the quiet cost of mastery. As time moves forward, the world begins to recognize you not merely as a wandering fighter, but as something more unsettling. You are no longer just a man who wins duels. You are a presence that unsettles balance wherever you pass. This realization does not bring pride. It brings caution. The more attention you attract, the heavier the consequences of each step become. You enter towns with awareness sharpened to its edge. People do not always challenge you directly anymore. Instead, they watch. They whisper. Some admire from a distance. Others measure you silently, imagining how your name might elevate theirs if they were to face you. This silent attention feels heavier than open hostility. It means intention is forming somewhere nearby. Your understanding of conflict continues to deepen. You see now that most battles are decided before weapons are drawn. Posture, timing, hesitation, confidence. These reveal everything. You begin to arrive late to duels deliberately. You choose terrain carefully. You allow opponents to wait, to doubt, to tire. This is not cruelty. It is understanding. Control of the moment is control of the outcome. Your two-sword method becomes more refined, not as a formal style, but as an extension of how you move through the world. One blade measures, the other commits. You stop thinking of swords as separate tools. They become expressions of intent, shaped by circumstance rather than rule. Life remains austere. You continue to carry little. You do not seek comfort. You sleep where you can. Hunger returns often, but you accept it as part of clarity. Excess dulls awareness. Simplicity sharpens it. You begin to understand that discipline is not restraint imposed from outside, but choice made repeatedly in private. Loneliness becomes constant, but it also becomes familiar. You do not resist it anymore. Solitude gives space for observation. It allows thought to move without interference. You watch your own mind carefully, noting when impatience arises, when pride whispers, when fatigue clouds judgment. This self-observation becomes as important as physical training. You begin to step away from constant fighting not because you fear it, but because you understand its cost. Each duel reinforces habits. Each victory reinforces reputation. Reputation attracts danger. You seek instead to refine understanding. This leads you into deeper study, not of schools or manuals, but of nature, movement, and human behavior. You watch how water flows around obstacles, how trees bend under wind, how animals react to threat. These observations are not poetic. They are practical. They teach timing, adaptation, and efficiency. You begin to see combat as part of a larger pattern rather than a separate skill. The political landscape continues to settle slowly. Large-scale wars become less frequent. Formal schools and styles grow in popularity. Many warriors now seek structured paths, ranks, and recognition. You remain outside these systems by choice. Structure limits adaptation. You value freedom of response over tradition. This independence isolates you further. You are respected but rarely welcomed. You are known but not fully understood. People try to place you into categories that do not fit. You resist this quietly by refusing explanation. As this phase of your life deepens, you feel the path narrowing again, not toward confrontation, but toward reflection. The sword remains central, yet it is no longer the destination. It is a tool for understanding something broader, something that touches discipline, awareness, and the nature of life itself. The road remains long and quiet. Each step forward carries experience rather than ambition. You move not to conquer, but to learn. And learning, you discover, demands more patience and honesty than any duel ever did. As the years continue to pass, your life begins to slow in a way that is not obvious from the outside. You still walk the roads. You still carry your blades. You still remain alert. But inside, something has shifted. The urgency that once pushed you from duel to duel has softened into steady awareness. You are no longer chasing mastery. You are living inside it, testing it quietly against the world as it presents itself. You spend longer periods alone now, not moving constantly, but staying in places long enough to observe them fully. Villages reveal patterns when watched patiently. People repeat themselves. Conflicts arise from the same small misunderstandings. Pride causes unnecessary harm. Fear creates predictable reactions. You begin to see that combat is only one expression of a much larger human struggle. When challenges do arise, you meet them without ceremony. There is no announcement, no flourish. Your approach is direct, calm, and efficient. Opponents often misunderstand this calm. They expect aggression or arrogance. Instead, they face stillness. Stillness unsettles them. It forces them to confront themselves without distraction. Your reputation continues to grow, but you no longer engage with it. Praise feels distant. Fear feels irrelevant. You understand now that reputation exists outside your control. Trying to shape it is wasted effort. You focus instead on maintaining clarity within yourself. This clarity becomes your true discipline. You train less visibly but more constantly. Walking becomes practice. Sitting becomes practice. Even eating and resting are approached with awareness. You notice posture, breathing, balance. The sword is present, but not always in your hands. It exists in how you move through space and time. During this period, you begin to express yourself beyond combat. You draw, you write, you observe form and emptiness. These activities are not hobbies. They are extensions of the same discipline that governs your sword work. Lines on paper reflect intention just as movement does. Mistakes appear instantly. Correction requires honesty. The world around you continues to stabilize. Large wars fade into memory. Formalized schools gain influence. Students seek rank and certification. You remain outside all of this. You do not reject it loudly. You simply do not participate. You understand that structure can preserve knowledge, but it can also freeze it. Your path requires flexibility. This independence carries cost. Without affiliation, you lack protection. Without students, you lack support. Without patronage, you lack security. Yet you accept this willingly. Dependence limits honesty. You value freedom of thought above comfort. Your interactions with others become brief and precise. You speak only when needed. Words like movement must serve purpose. Silence becomes a tool rather than an absence. Many misunderstand this silence as arrogance or mystery. You do not correct them. Understanding does not require explanation. You reflect often on death, not with fear, but with practicality. You have lived close to it for many years. It no longer surprises you. What concerns you now is not dying, but living without clarity. You recognize that the true failure would be to allow habit or pride to dull awareness. The idea of legacy begins to surface quietly. Not legacy of victory or dominance, but of understanding. You consider whether what you have learned can be communicated without distortion. You understand how easily techniques become rituals, and rituals become empty repetition. The challenge is not preserving movement, but preserving perception. As this stage of your life settles into steady rhythm, you are no longer defined by duels won or enemies defeated. You are defined by consistency of awareness. The path has narrowed again, not toward violence, but toward insight. The night deepens around you as you sit with these thoughts, the world moving softly beyond reach. Your life continues forward, quieter now, heavier with understanding, and guided not by ambition, but by deliberate, unbroken attention to the moment as it unfolds. As your life continues into deeper maturity, the sharp edges of constant movement begin to soften, not because danger disappears, but because you have changed the way you meet it. You are no longer pulled forward by the road. You choose when to walk, when to stop, and when to remain still. This is not comfort. It is control. You begin to spend longer stretches in isolation, sometimes near temples, sometimes in quiet countryside, sometimes on the edge of towns where nothing is expected of you. These pauses are not retreats. They are deliberate spaces where awareness can deepen without interruption. You understand now that constant motion can become another form of distraction. The sword remains near, but it no longer defines every moment. You carry it because it is part of you, not because you expect to use it. Your posture itself discourages challenge. Those who observe you closely sense something different. There is no tension in you, no eagerness, no display. This absence of obvious intent makes you difficult to read and therefore difficult to confront. You think often about conflict without enemies, about how struggle appears not only between people but within thought itself. Desire interrupts clarity. Fear narrows perception. Pride distorts timing. You begin to see that the most dangerous opponent has always been internal, because it moves invisibly and never rests. Your practice becomes quieter. You no longer rehearse techniques in repetition. Instead, you examine principles: distance, timing, rhythm, adaptation. You ask yourself how these apply not only to combat, but to decision, speech, and movement through life. The sword becomes a way of seeing rather than an object of action. You observe others carefully, not to judge, but to understand. You notice how people rush to fill silence, how they cling to certainty, how they mistake habit for truth. These observations deepen your understanding of why conflict arises so easily and resolves so rarely. During this time, you write more. Not to teach others yet, but to clarify your own thinking. Writing forces honesty. Ideas that feel solid in the mind reveal weakness on the page. You revise without attachment. You discard without regret. What remains is simple, direct, and difficult to misuse. You also turn to art more frequently. Painting and calligraphy become extensions of discipline. Each stroke reflects intention. Hesitation leaves marks. Confidence leaves clarity. You discover that the same awareness required to strike decisively is required to place a single line without correction. Your relationship with society remains distant. You are known but not involved, respected but not followed. This distance protects your clarity, but it also deepens solitude. You accept this without complaint. Loneliness is no longer an enemy. It is a condition of the path you have chosen. You no longer measure your life by victories or recognition. You measure it by whether awareness remains intact under pressure, whether calm persists when expectation arises, whether action follows necessity rather than impulse. The world continues to move forward without you at its center. Power shifts. Schools rise. Names fade. You remain largely unchanged, not because you resist change, but because you have aligned yourself with principles that do not depend on time. As this part of your life settles into stillness and observation, you sense that what you have been pursuing was never mastery over others. It was mastery over confusion. The sword taught you that. The road confirmed it. And so you continue quietly refining perception, carrying less, speaking less, and seeing more, moving toward a depth of understanding that cannot be taken, challenged, or displayed, only lived. As the years move forward, your life becomes increasingly quiet on the surface, yet deeper beneath. The world around you continues its steady rhythm, but you no longer feel pulled to move with it. You remain attentive, not detached, observing without urgency. This stillness is not emptiness. It is fullness without noise. You begin to recognize how easily people confuse activity with purpose. Many around you stay busy to avoid reflection. You do the opposite. You allow space for thought to unfold slowly. In this space, patterns appear more clearly. The same motivations drive conflict again and again. The same misunderstandings create suffering. Nothing truly new emerges, only variations of the same themes. Your understanding of strategy deepens beyond combat. You see that true advantage comes from positioning before conflict begins. In life, this means choosing environment, timing, and response carefully. You avoid situations that force reaction. You seek those that allow deliberate action. This approach shapes how you live more than how you fight. You spend time refining ideas that have followed you for years. You consider the relationship between strength and flexibility. You observe how rigid people break under pressure, while adaptable ones endure. This principle applies to the body, the mind, and the world. You begin to see adaptability not as compromise but as precision. When you reflect on your past, you do so without nostalgia. You acknowledge mistakes without regret. Each duel, each loss, each narrow escape taught something essential. Dwelling on them serves no purpose. The path continues forward and awareness remains anchored in the present. You interact with others sparingly, yet with intention. When you speak clearly. When you remain silent, you do so deliberately. This economy of expression mirrors your approach to movement. Nothing extra, nothing wasted. The sword, once central to every thought, now exists almost as background. You do not feel its absence when it is not in your hand. Its lessons have already moved inward. You carry timing, distance, and awareness without needing steel to remind you. Your writing becomes more focused. You begin organizing ideas into principles rather than stories. These ideas are simple, yet difficult to misunderstand if approached honestly. You resist ornamentation. Complexity obscures truth. Simplicity reveals it. You are aware that others may eventually seek these ideas, not because they understand them, but because they attach your name to them. This awareness creates a quiet responsibility. You begin to consider how to communicate without encouraging imitation. Technique can be copied. Understanding cannot. The world remains unpredictable, but you no longer feel threatened by uncertainty. Uncertainty is simply the environment in which awareness operates. Control is an illusion. Response is real. As this phase of your life continues, you are no longer defined by who you might face or what you might achieve. You are defined by consistency of perception, by the ability to remain unchanged while everything else shifts. The road ahead is not marked by duels or destinations, but by clarity maintained through time. This is not an ending. It is a settling, a deepening of what has always been present beneath motion and conflict. And so you continue quietly, steadily, carrying no banner, claiming no title, walking a path that grows narrower, clearer, and more internal with every step. As your life moves further into its later rhythm, something important becomes clear with quiet certainty. You are no longer being shaped by the world. You are shaping yourself in response to it. The chaos of earlier years has faded into memory, not because it disappeared, but because you have learned how to exist within it without being consumed. You no longer travel constantly, yet you are never truly settled. Stillness and movement exist together now. When you walk with purpose. When you stop completely. There is no restless shifting between states. Each moment stands on its own, full and deliberate. You begin to see how many people live divided lives. Their thoughts race ahead of their actions. Their fears lag behind reality. You recognize this division instantly because you once lived inside it yourself. Now, alignment matters more than outcome. What you do, how you think, and how you move begin to operate as one. Conflict no longer feels external. You notice that most struggle begins long before an enemy appears. It begins an attachment to outcome, to reputation, to certainty. You have gradually released these attachments, not through effort, but through understanding their cost. What remains is responsiveness without expectation. Your daily life becomes simple. You eat modestly. You sleep lightly. You wake early. Not from discipline imposed, but from habit shaped by years of necessity. The body adjusts. The mind follows. There is little excess in your routine, and because of that, very little friction. You continue to observe nature closely, not with wonder but with attentiveness. You watch how things end without resistance, how leaves fall without hesitation, how water does not argue with gravity. These observations reinforce what the sword has already taught you. Efficiency comes from acceptance, not force. Your art deepens. When you paint or write, you do not plan extensively. You begin when the moment is right. You stop when clarity fades. This restraint keeps expression honest. You leave space deliberately, understanding that emptiness gives form its meaning. People who encounter you now often misunderstand your calm. Some assume detachment. Others assume superiority. Few understand that calm is not absence of feeling, but mastery of response. You do not correct them. Explanation is unnecessary. You reflect occasionally on death, not with fear or anticipation, but with neutrality. Death is no longer an interruption. It is simply part of the same flow that has guided every step so far. You prepare not through ritual, but through clarity. A clear life requires no rehearsal for its ending. The teachings forming within you feel complete, yet you continue refining them, not adding, but removing. You strip away what is unnecessary. What remains is direct, adaptable, and difficult to misuse. You understand now that the most dangerous ideas are the ones that appear impressive rather than useful. You sense that your time is no longer defined by challenge or survival, but by transmission. Not through crowds or schools, but through example and written thought. Whether others understand is not your concern. Your responsibility is only to remain honest. As this part of your life settles, you exist fully in the present, not drifting, not resisting, simply aligned. The sword rests quietly beside you, no longer demanding attention, because its work has already been done. The path continues, calm and narrow, leading not toward confrontation but toward completion, where nothing needs to be proven and nothing needs to be defended. As your life continues onward, the sense of urgency that once shaped your days has almost completely dissolved. What remains is not emptiness, but clarity without pressure. You no longer feel the need to move unless movement serves understanding. You no longer feel the need to speak unless words serve truth. Silence, once something endured, has become something you trust. You begin to understand how rare this state is. Most people never reach it. They remain caught between wanting and fearing, acting and hesitating, striving and doubting. You have slowly stepped out of that cycle, not through effort, but through exhaustion of illusion. Nothing left to prove means nothing left to defend. Your relationship with time changes. Days no longer feel like steps toward something else. Each day stands complete. Morning does not rush toward evening. Evening does not resist night. This does not make life smaller. It makes it precise. You give full attention to what is present, because presence no longer competes with ambition. You continue to write, but now with restraint. You do not explain more than necessary. You trust the reader to meet you halfway. If they cannot, that is not failure. It simply means the timing is wrong. You understand that understanding cannot be forced, only offered. Your thoughts return often to the nature of confrontation. You see now that most conflict arises from misalignment rather than opposition. People fight not because paths cross, but because they refuse to adjust. You have learned to adjust without losing direction. This is not compromise, it is awareness applied in motion. You notice how people react to your presence now. There is less curiosity and more quiet respect, though it is rarely expressed directly. Some sense danger, others sense calm. Both are correct. Calm that cannot be shaken appears dangerous to those who rely on chaos for momentum. The sword remains part of your life, but its role has fully changed. It no longer defines who you are. It reminds you of what you learned. You hold it occasionally, not to practice technique, but to confirm balance. The body remembers. The mind remains steady. You spend time thinking about how easily teachings become distorted. Techniques become rituals. Principles become rules. Rules become limitations. You resist this by keeping everything flexible, grounded in situation rather than instruction. This makes your ideas harder to package but harder to misuse. The simplicity of your life deepens. You need little. Food sustains. Shelter protects. Beyond that, excess creates noise. You have lived long enough to know that noise erodes awareness faster than hardship ever did. Your view of success has completely shifted. Survival once felt like victory. Later, mastery felt like success. Now, neither matters. What matters is coherence. That thought, action, and response remain aligned even when circumstances shift. This alignment feels quiet, but it is stronger than force. You feel no urgency about legacy. Names fade. Stories change. Understanding moves invisibly from one mind to another. When conditions allow, you release control over how you are remembered. Control belongs to the living. Acceptance belongs to clarity. As this part of your life continues, you exist without friction. Not because the world is gentle, but because you no longer push against it unnecessarily. Resistance has been replaced by responsiveness, effort by efficiency, noise by stillness. The road ahead remains, but it no longer feels long. Distance matters less than presence. Each step, each breath, each quiet moment carries its own completeness. You continue forward, not seeking anything, not avoiding anything, simply walking the path as it unfolds, aware, balanced, and at ease within motion itself. As your life moves into its final stretch, a deep and steady calm settles over everything you do. This calm is not the absence of danger or difficulty. It is the result of having faced both so completely that they no longer distort your perception. You are no longer shaped by reaction. You move from understanding. You now live more deliberately apart from society, not in rejection of it, but in quiet separation. The noise of ambition, rivalry, and comparison no longer reaches you in the same way. You see these things clearly in others, but they do not pull you inward. What once demanded attention now passes like weather. Your body has changed. Strength has softened. Speed has slowed slightly. Yet none of this feels like loss. Awareness has replaced what time has taken. You no longer rely on reflex alone. You rely on positioning, anticipation, and timing refined over decades. What once required effort now feels natural. You spend long hours in stillness, sometimes sitting, sometimes walking slowly through familiar paths. These moments are not empty. They are filled with observation. You notice subtle shifts in light, sound, and movement. You understand now that awareness does not require constant action. It requires presence. Your thoughts about conflict have reached a quiet conclusion. You see that most battles are unnecessary, not because they are wrong, but because they are inefficient. Conflict wastes energy when clarity could redirect it. This understanding does not make you passive. It makes you precise. Writing becomes simpler. You remove what is unnecessary. You focus on principles rather than instruction. You know that those who seek techniques will miss the point. Those who seek understanding will find enough. You do not try to guide everyone. You accept that most people will approach your words through their own limitations. Your art reflects this simplicity. Fewer strokes, more space. Each mark placed only when it matters. You leave emptiness deliberately, trusting the viewer to complete what is not shown. This mirrors how you live. You do not fill every moment. You allow space for things to settle. You think often about the path you have walked, not with pride, not with regret, simply with acknowledgement. Each phase served its purpose. Violence taught clarity. Isolation taught independence. Stillness taught alignment. Nothing feels wasted. Nothing feels unresolved. Death no longer feels like an interruption. It feels like a natural pause in the same flow you have followed all along. You do not rush toward it. You do not resist it. You prepare by remaining clear, moment by moment. A life lived without distortion needs no dramatic ending. You are aware that others will continue to speak your name after you are gone. Some will exaggerate. Some will misunderstand. Some will imitate surface without grasping depth. This does not concern you. Truth does not depend on recognition. It persists quietly, where conditions allow it to be seen. Your final years are not marked by grand events. They are marked by consistency, calm mornings, quiet days, evenings without expectation. This simplicity is not emptiness. It is completion without noise. As this part of your life unfolds, you stand fully inside the present. Nothing pulls you backward. Nothing pushes you forward. You exist exactly where you are, aware, balanced, and unburdened. The path does not end dramatically. It narrows gently, guiding you toward rest without resistance. And in this narrowing, you understand fully what the sword had been teaching you from the beginning. That mastery is not domination, but harmony with the moment as it is. As the final years continue to unfold, your life becomes almost weightless in its simplicity. Not empty, not withdrawn, but free from unnecessary tension. You wake without urgency. You move without hesitation. The sharp edges that once defined your existence have softened into something steady and unbreakable. This steadiness is not stillness. It is balance maintained without effort. You spend more time alone now, not because you avoid people, but because solitude no longer feels like absence. It feels complete. When others do appear, conversations are brief and direct. You listen more than you speak. You understand that words often obscure more than they reveal. Presence communicates enough. Your body continues to age, yet you treat it with respect rather than resistance. Pain comes and goes. Fatigue arrives earlier. You adjust naturally. You do not force strength where it no longer serves purpose. You have learned that forcing anything breaks alignment. Efficiency lies in acceptance. The sword remains nearby, but it rests more often than it moves. When you hold it, there is no tension in your grip. The blade feels like an extension of breath rather than muscle. You no longer rehearse. You simply confirm that awareness is intact. That is enough. Your writing reaches its most distilled form. You remove explanation. You remove justification. What remains is principle expressed plainly. You trust the reader to encounter it honestly or not at all. You understand that teaching is not transmission of control, but invitation to perception. You reflect occasionally on the long road behind you, the early hunger, the restless movement, the duels, the isolation. You see now that each phase stripped away illusion. Nothing could have been skipped. The path revealed itself only by being walked. You do not feel separate from the world anymore, nor do you feel absorbed by it. You exist alongside it, aware of its rhythms without being pulled by them. Change no longer disturbs you. Stability no longer comforts you. Both are simply conditions. Thoughts about death appear gently without fear. You understand that the end of breath is not the end of understanding. What matters is clarity maintained until the last moment. A confused life ends confused. A clear life ends clearly. You focus only on that. Your days pass quietly. There are no announcements, no gatherings, no recognition. Yet nothing feels lacking. The absence of demand allows attention to rest where it belongs, in the present moment, fully inhabited. As this part of your life settles into its final calm, the journey no longer feels like movement towards something else. It feels complete exactly as it is. Each moment stands whole. Each breath requires no improvement. You continue to live without resistance, without urgency, without regret. The path narrows not because options disappear, but because distraction no longer exists. And so quietly, steadily, you remain aware, grounded, and at ease, carrying nothing forward except clarity itself. As time continues its gentle movement, your life reaches a state where nothing feels unfinished, yet nothing feels concluded either. There is a quiet continuity to each day, a sense that life is no longer divided into phases of struggle and rest, but exists as a single unbroken flow. You are no longer becoming anything. You are simply remaining clear. You notice how easily the world pulls people into urgency. Even small events create agitation. Small losses feel large. Small victories create attachment. You observe this without judgment. You remember living inside that tension once. You understand now that urgency is not created by circumstance but by expectation. Without expectation, movement becomes calm. Your routine is simple and repeatable. You wake with the light. You sit quietly before doing anything else. You allow the mind to settle before engaging the world. This settling is not meditation as a technique. It is familiarity with stillness. You have visited it so often that it no longer feels separate from action. You eat modestly. You walk slowly. You pause often. None of this is ritual. It is responsiveness. You adjust according to energy, weather, and condition. You do not force consistency for its own sake. True discipline, you have learned, is not rigidity. It is sensitivity. The teachings forming within you feel complete, yet you remain careful not to finalize them into doctrine. You know how easily fixed ideas become cages. Instead, you allow principles to remain open, applicable across situations rather than bound to form. This openness preserves their usefulness. You consider how conflict appears in subtle ways, not as duels or arguments, but as resistance to what is present. People resist aging. They resist loss. They resist uncertainty. This resistance creates suffering far more reliably than any external enemy. You no longer resist these things. You acknowledge them, adjust, and move on. Your body, though quieter now, still responds when needed. Balance remains. Awareness remains. You trust this without testing it. Testing would introduce doubt. Doubt would introduce effort. Effort would disturb alignment. You allow capability to exist without demonstration. You spend time in nature not to escape society, but to remain aligned with rhythm. You watch clouds move without direction. You listen to water without expectation. These observations reinforce what you already know. Control is unnecessary. Attention is enough. Occasionally, someone approaches you seeking instruction. You offer little, not from secrecy, but from understanding. Most people seek confirmation, not clarity. You respond only to those who are willing to observe rather than imitate. Even then, you speak sparingly. The rest must be discovered alone. Your thoughts turn occasionally to the idea of completion, not as an ending, but as a state where nothing presses for resolution. You recognize that this state cannot be forced. It emerges only when striving has exhausted itself. You have arrived here not by seeking it, but by outlasting illusion. As the days pass quietly, you remain attentive to small details. The way breath changes with posture, the way light shifts across a wall, the way sound fades into silence. These details are not distractions. They are confirmations that awareness is alive and unbroken. You do not feel detached from life. You feel deeply present within it. The difference is subtle but complete. Presence requires no commentary, no comparison, no judgment. It simply observes and responds. As this part of your life continues, the sense of self grows lighter, not weaker, lighter, less burdened by identity, history, or expectation. What remains is responsiveness without weight. The road does not call you forward urgently anymore. It lies there quietly, available if needed, unnecessary if not. You understand now that walking and resting are the same when awareness does not change. And so you continue, not toward an ending, not away from one, but within the same clear movement that has guided you for years. Steady, unforced, and complete in each moment as it arrives. As the quiet years continue to pass, your life feels increasingly transparent, as if nothing stands between awareness and experience anymore. The effort once required to stay attentive has faded. Attention now rests naturally, without being summoned. You do not hold on to it. It remains on its own, steady and calm. You notice how memory loses its weight. The past no longer pulls you backward. Victories, losses, long roads, and narrow escapes exist now as simple facts, not identities. They do not demand retelling. They do not require meaning. They are complete because they happened, not because they are remembered. Your sense of self continues to thin, not in weakness but in simplicity. You are no longer defined by role, reputation, or even discipline. These were useful structures once. Now they dissolve quietly, leaving only responsiveness behind. When action is needed, it happens. When rest is needed, it happens. Nothing argues with either state. You see clearly how most people live in anticipation, waiting for improvement, waiting for resolution, waiting for permission to be at ease. You understand now that ease cannot be postponed. It appears only when the habit of postponement ends. You do not wait anymore. You live where you are. Your relationship with skill has fully matured. Skill no longer feels like something you possess. It feels like something that moves through you when conditions require it. There is no pride in this. Pride would interrupt flow. There is only trust in what remains after years of refinement. You spend long periods simply observing without seeking insight. Insight arises on its own when observation is uninterrupted. You no longer analyze experience. Analysis once served learning. Now it interferes. You allow understanding to emerge without force. Your writing slows. Not because there is nothing left to say, but because words feel increasingly unnecessary. When you do write, it is brief and exact. You leave space deliberately, knowing that space invites clarity more effectively than explanation ever could. You reflect occasionally on the nature of legacy, not with concern but curiosity. You see how names travel through time, collecting meanings that do not belong to them. You release ownership over how you will be remembered. Ownership creates attachment. Attachment creates distortion. You choose clarity instead. The body continues to age quietly. You do not resist its changes. You listen to its limits without frustration. Fatigue arrives earlier. Recovery takes longer. This does not feel like loss. It feels like information. You adjust naturally, without commentary. You recognize now that the sword was never the center of your life. It was a doorway. It brought you face to face with urgency, fear, timing, and consequence. Once those lessons settled into awareness, the sword's work was complete. What remains does not depend on steel. Your days pass gently. You wake. You move. You observe. You rest. Nothing presses for completion. Nothing waits for resolution. Each day closes naturally, without summary. As this part of your life continues, you sense that the journey has already given everything it needs to give, not as an ending, but as fullness. There is no missing piece, no unanswered question demanding pursuit. You remain attentive, quiet, and unburdened, not withdrawn from the world, not entangled within it, simply present as life continues to unfold, moment by moment, without resistance. As your life continues into its final quiet stretch, the sense of effort fades almost completely. What once required discipline now exists as habit without tension. Awareness does not need to be summoned. It is present before thought, before intention, before movement. You live inside it the way others live inside noise. You no longer measure days. Morning arrives. Evening follows. The space between them feels complete regardless of what happens within it. There is no pressure to fill time. Time fills itself. You participate without interference. Your surroundings become familiar in a way that feels gentle rather than dull. You notice how seasons shift without announcing themselves. Subtle changes in air, light, and sound mark passage more accurately than calendars ever could. You move with these changes naturally, adjusting pace without planning. Your body continues to change, but you do not argue with it. Strength has transformed into steadiness. Speed has softened into timing. You trust this exchange. What the body releases, awareness compensates for. Nothing essential feels lost. You think less often now. Not because thought has vanished, but because it no longer dominates experience. When thoughts appear, they pass without demand. You do not follow them. You do not resist them. They dissolve on their own. You spend time simply sitting, not meditating as a practice, but resting as a state. In these moments, there is no separation between observer and observed. Sound happens, breath happens, sensation happens. There is no need to name any of it. Naming would only add distance. When others appear, you meet them directly, without role or expectation. You do not present yourself as teacher or master. You respond only to what is asked, and sometimes not even then. Silence communicates more accurately than explanation ever could. Your writing slows further. You remove more than you add. What remains becomes increasingly sparse. Each line must earn its place. You understand now that excess information creates confusion. Precision creates clarity. You reflect quietly on how conflict once defined your path. Not with regret, not with pride. Simply recognition. Conflict shaped attention. Attention revealed awareness. Awareness removed the need for conflict. The progression feels complete. The idea of ending no longer carries weight. You do not wait for it, you do not fear it, you do not prepare for it separately. Preparation happens naturally when life is lived without distortion. There is nothing to arrange. You sense that whatever remains to be lived will unfold without effort. You will respond when response is needed. You will rest when rest arrives. Nothing is forced. Nothing is avoided. As this part of your life settles, identity feels almost transparent. There is no urge to define yourself. Definition would only narrow what remains open. You exist without label, without title, without ambition. The path does not end here, it does not need to. It simply continues quietly, without narrative, without urgency, without resistance, steady as breath, present as awareness itself. As your life moves gently forward, there's a growing sense that nothing needs to be added anymore. Not to your skill, not to your understanding, not to your days. The accumulation that once defined progress has slowed to stillness. What remains is refinement through absence rather than effort. You notice how rarely you feel pulled in any direction. Desire no longer tugs at attention. Fear no longer interrupts calm. Even curiosity feels different now, quieter and less demanding. You observe not to gain something, but because observation itself feels complete. Your movements have become minimal yet exact. You do not waste steps. You do not rush gestures. Every action feels appropriate to the moment that called for it. This economy is not restraint. It is alignment. Nothing extra appears, because nothing extra is needed. You reflect occasionally on how difficult this state would have seemed earlier in your life. Back then, silence felt like lack. Stillness felt like stagnation. Now both feel rich, layered, and alive. You understand that depth does not announce itself. It reveals itself slowly to those who remain. You spend time near simple places, a quiet room, a shaded path, an open view where nothing demands attention. These environments do not inspire thought. They allow thought to rest. In rest, clarity remains undisturbed. Your relationship with effort has fully changed. You no longer push toward outcomes. You respond when conditions require action. When they do not, you remain still without restlessness. This balance does not feel learned. It feels remembered. The sword rests nearby, but you rarely touch it now. When you do, it is with familiarity rather than intention. There is no testing, no rehearsal. You trust what remains. Trust removes the need for proof. You notice that even your sense of time has softened. Moments no longer feel sequential. They feel continuous. One breath blends into the next, without separation. This continuity carries through everything you do. There is no rush to finish, no need to begin again. You are aware that many would interpret this quiet as withdrawal. You know it is not. Withdrawal implies avoidance. This is presence without interference. You are fully here, but nothing pulls at you. Your understanding of conflict has resolved into something simple. Conflict arises when perception narrows. When perception widens, conflict dissolves before it forms. You do not prevent conflict. You outgrow its conditions. As this part of your life unfolds, you feel no urge to mark it, record it, or explain it. Explanation belongs to those still searching. You are not searching. You are resting within what has already been found. The world continues around you, full of noise, ambition, and urgency. You remain unaffected not because you are separate, but because you are no longer caught. You move when movement is needed. You remain still when it is not. There is a quiet gratitude in this state, though it does not appear as emotion. It appears as ease. Ease with uncertainty, ease with change, ease with whatever comes next. And so you continue gently and without resistance, living a life that no longer seeks definition, only presence, as each moment arrives complete and leaves nothing unresolved behind it. As your life moves even closer to its natural quiet conclusion, the sense of separation between living and understanding almost completely disappears. There is no longer a feeling that insight comes after experience. Insight and experience exist together, unfolding at the same pace without delay. Nothing needs to be interpreted. Everything is already clear. You no longer distinguish between practice and ordinary life. Walking, sitting, eating, resting, all carry the same attention that once belonged only to combat or training. This attention does not strain. It rests lightly, touching each moment without gripping it. Because of this, fatigue does not accumulate the way it once did. Energy moves freely, unblocked by resistance. You notice how silence has changed meaning. Earlier in life, silence was preparation. Later, it was reflection. Now, it is simply the background of everything. Sound appears and disappears within it without disruption. You do not follow sound. You do not wait for it to end. Silence holds it naturally. Your thoughts arrive less frequently, and when they do, they feel distant, almost like echoes rather than commands. You do not need to silence them. They pass on their own, dissolving without effort. This absence of inner struggle feels gentle, stable, and deeply familiar. You remain aware of the body's gradual slowing. Movements are smaller now, more economical. Yet nothing feels diminished. Each motion feels complete within itself. You understand now that speed was never the point. Timing was. Presence was. Those remain untouched by age. You reflect briefly on how the world may continue to shape stories around your name. Some will imagine drama where there was discipline. Others will imagine mystery where there was simplicity. You do not resist these stories. They belong to the world, not to you. Your responsibility ended with honesty of action. The ideas you once worried might be misunderstood now feel free of concern. If someone understands, they understand. If not, they will meet the ideas again later, perhaps through a different form. Understanding follows readiness, not explanation. You feel no need to protect what you have learned. Protection implies fear of loss. Nothing essential can be lost now. Awareness does not belong to you. It never did. It simply passes through clearly when nothing blocks it. As days pass, you notice how little separates one from the next. They blend smoothly without sharp edges. Morning flows into evening without announcement. Evening settles into night without resistance. This continuity feels natural, almost kind. You no longer imagine a future version of yourself. Planning has narrowed to what is necessary. Everything else unfolds on its own. This absence of projection brings a lightness that cannot be achieved through effort. There is no dramatic insight waiting ahead, no final realization still hidden. What you sought has already revealed itself through living. The path did not lead somewhere else. It led here, to a place where nothing presses for change. And so you remain quietly attentive, gently responsive, and fully present, not preparing for an ending, not clinging to continuation, simply allowing life to move through you as it always has, now without resistance, without urgency, and without weight. As the final stretch of your life unfolds, there is a subtle sense that nothing is moving toward conclusion, yet everything feels settled. This is not an ending in the way stories often describe. There is no final challenge waiting, no revelation still hidden. What remains is continuity without effort, a calm acceptance of each moment exactly as it appears. You wake and rest without distinction. Sleep arrives naturally. Waking follows without resistance. There is no feeling of time lost or gained. Time no longer measures value. Presence does. Each breath feels complete on its own, requiring nothing from the next. You notice how the world still tries to pull attention outward. Sounds, events, distant concerns continue as they always have. Yet they pass through awareness without sticking. You do not push them away. You do not follow them. They move like wind through open space, leaving no trace behind. Your body carries the quiet signs of age, but you meet them without commentary. Pain arises and fades. Strength shifts. Balance adjusts. None of this feels personal. The body does what bodies do. You respond without judgment. This simple response keeps everything steady. You think less about teaching and more about example, though even that feels secondary now. Example happens without intention. How you move, how you remain silent, how you respond. These speak more clearly than instruction ever could. Those who notice will notice. Those who do not are not missing anything meant for them. Your writing slows to almost nothing, not because there is nothing left to express, but because expression feels complete without words. When words do appear, they are brief, spare, and precise. Each one stands alone, without explanation, without defense. You reflect quietly on how the path once felt demanding and narrow, how each decision seemed heavy with consequence. Now those memories feel distant, not because they are forgotten, but because their weight has dissolved. Experience remains. Burden does not. You no longer evaluate yourself. There is no internal measurement of progress or decline. Evaluation requires comparison. Comparison requires division. Division has no place here. What is happening is enough. Your surroundings become almost transparent. You notice details without holding on to them. Light moves across a surface, sound rises and falls, breath continues. None of this requires attention to function. Awareness includes everything effortlessly. You sense that even the idea of identity has softened. You do not think of yourself as warrior, teacher, artist, or philosopher. These were descriptions useful once. Now they feel unnecessary. What remains cannot be named without narrowing it. The thought of death passes through the mind occasionally, but it carries no urgency. It feels like another change in condition, no more dramatic than night following day. You do not imagine it. You do not prepare for it separately. Preparation has already happened through how you have lived. As this part of your life continues, there is no desire to close anything, finalize anything, or leave anything behind. Life does not need punctuation. It moves as it moves. You remain quietly present within that movement, not standing apart from it, not directing it, simply allowing it to pass through without resistance, without demand, and without weight. And in this allowance, everything feels complete even as it continues. As your life continues gently onward, the sense of being an individual moving through time becomes almost transparent. There is still a body. There is still breath. There are still days and nights. Yet the feeling of being someone going somewhere has softened into simple presence. Nothing feels unfinished, and nothing feels complete in a way that demands closure. Life unfolds without commentary. You notice how easily effort disappears when nothing is resisted. Movements happen when they are needed. Stillness arrives when movement would add nothing. You no longer decide these things consciously. Decision implies hesitation. This feels more like listening and responding at the same time. The world continues to change around you. Seasons turn, people come and go. Events occur without asking for your involvement. You observe all of this without distance and without attachment. Observation does not pull you away from life. It places you directly inside it, without friction. Your body rests more often now. When fatigue appears, you allow it. When energy returns, you move. There is no attempt to preserve strength or avoid weakness. Both are temporary conditions. Awareness remains unchanged beneath them. This constancy feels reliable in a way the body never was. You rarely think of your earlier life unless something brings it forward naturally. A memory may surface. A road walked long ago. A duel remembered without emotion. A quiet night beneath open sky. These memories appear briefly, then dissolve. They do not demand interpretation. They have already done their work. You recognize now that discipline was never about control. It was about honesty. Honest awareness reveals what is necessary and what is excess. Over time, excess fell away on its own. What remains is light, direct, and adaptable. The idea of effort feels distant. Not because life is effortless, but because effort no longer comes from strain. When action is needed, it happens fully. When rest is needed, it happens completely. Partial action no longer exists. Everything is whole or not done at all. You remain sensitive to subtle changes, shifts in breath, posture, attention. These are not monitored anxiously. They are simply noticed. Noticing is enough to maintain balance. Correction happens naturally without force. Your surroundings feel intimate, even when they are vast. A small room contains as much life as an open landscape. Space does not determine depth. Awareness does. You feel at home wherever you are, not because the place is familiar, but because you are no longer divided from it. You no longer anticipate anything. Anticipation pulls attention away from what is present. You have learned that what matters appears only when attention remains where it is. Waiting dissolves. Arrival dissolves. There is only what is happening now. When others appear in your life, interactions are gentle and brief. You meet them fully, then release them completely. Nothing lingers. Nothing accumulates. This lightness keeps the mind clear and the heart unburdened. You sense that whatever remains of your life will continue in this same quiet rhythm. There is no expectation that it should become more or less. Change may come. Stillness may deepen. Either will be met the same way, without resistance. As this part of your life continues, the idea of path itself feels unnecessary. Paths imply direction. Direction implies destination. You no longer require either. Movement happens without aim. Rest happens without pause. You remain here, awake, responsive, and undisturbed, living not toward something, not away from anything, but fully within each moment as it arrives and passes, leaving nothing behind it that needs to be carried forward. As the quiet flow of your life continues, the sense of being carried by time becomes softer still. You no longer feel that you are moving through days. It feels instead that days are moving through you, appearing and fading without leaving weight behind. Morning light enters the space where you rest. Evening darkness follows. Neither asks anything of you. Both are accepted fully. You notice how little effort it now takes to remain attentive. Earlier in life, attention required discipline. It had to be protected from distraction, sharpened through repetition, defended against fear. Now it remains on its own, stable and open, like water settling after long disturbance. Nothing agitates it for long. Your body rests more deeply between movements. When you walk, each step is unhurried and exact. When you sit, there is no restlessness pulling you elsewhere. Sensation appears clearly, without demand for reaction. Even discomfort passes without becoming a problem. You understand the difference now between pain and resistance to pain. Resistance has faded. Thoughts arise less frequently, and when they do, they feel transparent. You see them forming before they fully appear. You watch them dissolve without effort. There is no need to follow or suppress them. They no longer shape behavior. Awareness remains primary. You reflect quietly on how the idea of mastery once felt distant and demanding. It required effort, risk, and endurance. Now mastery feels like absence. Absence of excess movement, excess thought, excess desire. What remains functions naturally without instruction. Your relationship with the world feels uncomplicated. You do not seek engagement, yet you are not withdrawn. When interaction arises, you meet it directly and simply. There is no need to prepare or recover afterward. Encounters leave no residue. Life passes cleanly through. You are aware that others may still speak of you, interpret you, or reshape your life into stories. These stories feel distant, almost unreal. They belong to movement outside your immediate experience. You do not correct them. Correction would imply investment. You have none. The sword, once central, now feels almost symbolic. Not as an object of meaning, but as a reminder of how learning begins, through friction, danger, and consequence. You respect it without attachment. It rests where it rests, doing nothing, needing nothing. You understand now that nothing essential was ever gained through force. Force only revealed what was already present. Awareness did the rest. This understanding brings a quiet kindness toward your younger self, who had to walk through hardship to reach this simplicity. Your days are not filled with reflection. They are filled with presence. Reflection appears occasionally lightly without pulling attention backward. The past no longer competes with the present. It rests where it belongs. You feel no need to organize your life into meaning. Meaning arises naturally when clarity is present. It does not require explanation or preservation. It exists only while attention remains open. As the light shifts and shadows lengthen, you remain unmoved by change. Not because change does not matter, but because it no longer threatens stability. Stability now comes from alignment, not from circumstance. You sense that whatever remains of your life will continue in this same quiet manner. There will be no sudden turn, no dramatic resolution. Just continued presence until presence itself fades gently, without resistance. For now you remain here, breathing, observing, responding when needed, resting when rest arrives, moving with the same calm rhythm that has slowly shaped your life into something light, clear, and complete, without ever needing to announce itself. As life continues to unfold with almost no resistance left within you, the sense of doing fades further into the background. What remains is a gentle participation in whatever arrives. You are no longer shaping your life. Life shapes itself, and you move with it naturally without needing to agree or disagree. Your breathing has become slow and even, not through control but through familiarity. The body knows how to rest now. It no longer holds tension in preparation for something else. Each breath completes itself fully before the next one begins. There is no rush between them. You notice how quiet the mind has become, not empty but spacious. Thoughts no longer collide or overlap. When one appears, it stands alone, then fades. Silence does not follow it. Silence was already there. Thought simply passed through. The world continues to offer small moments. The sound of wind, the movement of light, the presence of another person passing nearby. None of these moments ask for interpretation. They exist, then they leave. You allow them to do so without holding on. Your body rests more often now, yet there is no sense of decline. Rest does not feel like withdrawal. It feels like alignment with what is needed. When movement comes, it comes cleanly. When stillness comes, It settles fully. You understand now that effort was never the enemy. Unnecessary effort was. When effort served clarity, it shaped you. When effort served ego, it exhausted you. That distinction is now effortless to recognize. Action follows only when it aligns with necessity. You no longer think about how your life might appear to others. Appearance requires an observer. You have stepped beyond that exchange. What remains does not need to be seen to be complete. Your surroundings feel gentle even when they are plain. Nothing competes for attention. Nothing insists on importance. This quiet allows perception to remain wide and undisturbed. You notice details without focusing on them. You feel space without measuring it. You are aware that many people live their entire lives without touching this simplicity. Not because it is difficult, but because they never stop moving long enough to notice what remains when movement ends. You do not judge this. Everyone moves at their own pace. You no longer revisit decisions. Revisiting implies doubt. Doubt no longer finds ground. Each moment was met as fully as possible at the time. That is enough. Nothing needs correction now. The idea of future no longer forms clearly. Plans dissolve before they fully appear. What matters arrives on its own without anticipation. You respond when response is required. Otherwise, you remain at ease. You feel a quiet continuity between all moments of your life. The restless youth, the wandering fighter, the solitary observer, the quiet presence you are now. None of these feel separate. They were all expressions of the same movement, unfolding slowly. As this part of your life continues, there is no sense of approaching an ending. There is only a deepening of ease. Life becomes lighter not because it loses substance, but because nothing is carried forward unnecessarily. You remain here, attentive without effort, present without strain, moving only when movement belongs to the moment, allowing life to continue as it always has, now without friction, without urgency, and without weight. As this long life finally reaches its natural resting place, nothing dramatic announces the moment. There is no sharp line between living and ending, no final struggle, no last lesson delivered with urgency. Everything slows in the same gentle way it has slowed for years. The body rests more. The breath becomes quieter. Awareness remains clear. You do not look back searching for meaning. Meaning no longer belongs to memory. It exists only in how fully each moment was met while it arrived. And every moment, in its own quiet way, was met honestly. The sword lies still now, not as a symbol of violence or victory, but as a reminder of a path once walked with intensity and patience. It taught discipline when chaos ruled. It taught timing when fear interfered. It taught restraint when power tempted excess. Its lessons have already moved inward where they no longer require steel. Your life does not end as a legend inside your own awareness. Legends belong to others. Inside there is only simplicity, breath, stillness, presence. Nothing waits to be completed. Nothing waits to be said. The long road you walked, through danger, isolation, hunger, effort, discipline, and silence, no longer feels like a journey. It feels like a single movement that slowly unfolded, step by step, without ever rushing toward a destination. The destination was never ahead, it was always here in clarity. There is no resistance now, no holding on, no pushing away. What remains is a quiet acceptance so complete that it feels almost like rest before sleep. Not disappearance, not struggle, just easing. If the world remembers your name, it will remember fragments, duels, skill, writings, mystery. It will never fully capture the quiet life lived beneath those fragments. And that is fine. What mattered never needed an audience. As the final moments arrive gently, they do so without interruption. Breath softens. Awareness remains wide. The body settles the way a day settles into night. Without effort, without fear, without demand. And then just as quietly as it lived, this life comes to rest. No struggle, no urgency, no unfinished movement.